think so.
Okay, so shall we?
Yes, Gamble, you can start. And the others keep muted, I think.
Okay. So very warm welcome and good afternoon from Incheon, Republic of Korea. Thank you all for joining this webinar. I'm Ganbol Basanjav, head of United Nations ESCAP East and Northeast Asia office. The office is mandated to promote sub-regional cooperation in Northeast Asia, the reason why we jointly initiated this webinar today. First of all, I thank our co-organizers, College of International Development and Global Agriculture, CIDCA, of the China Agriculture University, and China International Development Research Network, CIDCA&KOICA, for partnering with us for this webinar. I very much appreciate their dedicated efforts in cooperation to prepare for this webinar. I would like to start this webinar with a simple question. Development cooperation agencies in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, what role do they play now and how do they plan to help other countries in post-COVID recovery? I ask this question because the official development cooperation agencies usually have defined roles, often separate from the humanitarian aid of their countries. Development cooperation has a special relevance to Northeast Asia. Why? Its economic powerhouses such as China, Japan, Republic of Korea, and the Russian Federation are also major players in supporting many developing countries across the world to achieve their sustainable development agenda. With COVID-19 outbreak, countries in the world are struggling to contain the pandemic and support the livelihood of their own population. Many governments are putting their resources behind domestic response measures. We see that is a priority for any country, regardless of their economic status, developed or developing. We also observed the help and cry for support for pandemic responses going in all directions, north-south, south-south, and south-north, whether we call it development cooperation, international cooperation, or something else. The extensive mutual support among countries in COVID-19 responses goes beyond the standard framework of development cooperation. The pandemic shed new light on the role and scope of development cooperation agencies in responding to the global crisis, such as this public health emergencies. The mission of these agencies, supporting long-term development, now faces surge of demand for emergency support and humanitarian assistance. In some countries, humanitarian and health emergency support are provided through different channels. In others, existing components of emergency assistance are enforced, or the existing supports are repurposed to meet the immediate needs. Nonetheless, many developing countries are also asking, what happens to us and our development? For many developing countries, immediate assistance for COVID-19 responses is critical. At the same time, supports through a development cooperation channel remains an important resource for their sustainable development. If the development cooperation budget is scaled down, it may threaten their future development. It is in addition to their support needed to recover from the already huge loss of the past progress in development, such as poverty reduction. As you know, China and the Republic of Korea were among the first hit and responded to the COVID-19 pandemic with large fiscal measures. The official development cooperation agencies are also providing assistance to other countries to fight against the COVID-19. So they are playing twin role now in development cooperation and supporting pandemic responses. So we are very fortunate today to have the opportunity to hear directly from the official agencies, China International Development Cooperation Agency, CIDCA, and Korea International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, on their experiences and initiatives in addressing the pandemic in the context of development cooperation. I very much look forward to engage discussion today. On that note, first, I'm pleased to invite Ms. Baek-Suk Hee, Vice President, Korea International Cooperation Agency, KOICA, to give a special remark for this occasion. Ms. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Gambold Basanjap. So, before my speech, I'm very pleased to meet CIDCA. So when I work in overseas offices, I would like to contact and meet any China people to discuss China's aid for the developing countries. Mr. Gambold Basanjap, the head of East and Northeast Asia Office of ESCAP, Mr. Gong Yuanxi, Vice President of China Agricultural University, Professor Xu Jiwi, Dean of College of International Development and Global Agriculture, China Agricultural University, Mr. Tian Lin, Director General of Department of International Cooperation, China International Development Cooperation Agency, CIDCA. Mr. Kim Yeon-hwan, as my colleague, Director General of Climate Crisis and Pandemic Response Department, KOICA. Professor Lee Dae-yoon, Lead Chair Professor at China Agricultural University, Chair of China International Development Research Network. Professor Kwon Hyuk-ju, of Seoul National University, President of Korea Association of International Development and Cooperation, CIDCA, and Professor Yamagata Tatsukumi, Lichimeikan Asia Pacific University, President of Japan Society of International Development, Ms. Cecilia Reyes, President of the Philippine Institute of Development Studies, Ms. Maji Monji Origi Lorenzo, Head of Economics and Strategy Unit, PRC Resident Mission, East Asia Department of ADB. And good afternoon. On behalf of the Korea International Cooperation Agency, it's my pleasure to deliver a welcoming speech at the special session of ESCAP Sidrun CAO CIDCA webinar. Let's start by addressing the tigers in this room. Northeast Asian nations have often been likened to tigers and dragons as we drew the world attention for our rapid economic development. Like tigers, we have been working independently, overcoming various challenges and using the knowledge to help others around the world. While tigers are solitary hunters, they are also flexible enough to work together when they face challenges that would be too much for a single tiger. That is exactly why we have gathered today, tigers of Northeast Asia coming together to overcome a global challenge. How global is this challenge? For now, at least half of the world population have no access to essential health services they need. Over 2 billion people, mostly in developing countries, are already suffering from infectious diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV. Moreover, COVID-19 not only threatens those who are at elevated risk, but also exposes 2/3 of the world to severe socioeconomic vulnerability and poverty with no immediate end in sight. An analysis from Eurodad and NGO Group shows that a step up in grant flows may be necessary. At least 45 low-income countries will need over $90 billion in emergency financing in 2020 alone. UNCTAD estimates the finance gap for developing countries as this effort at a staggering $2 to $3 trillion over the next 2 years. Citizens in developing countries will be hit hard not only by the virus itself, but also the socioeconomic difficulties caused by the crisis. This is most prevalent in the poorest and most vulnerable nations that lack the monetary, fiscal, and administrative capacity needed to respond to the pandemic adequately. The combined impact of the pandemic and global recession will be catastrophic. Increased ambition in terms of the volume of available resources will not be sufficient. This worldwide crisis is a painful reminder that many critical development challenges cannot be solved by the individual countries working in isolation. Likewise, challenges at a global scale will not be addressed by developed agencies on their own either. KOICA is putting forth policy-based responses to this crisis in order to explore the role of official development assistance in dealing with the worst crisis since the Second World War. On April, KOICA launched a ABC program, Agenda for Building Resilience Against COVID-19 through Development Cooperation, specifically to address the difficulties brought by COVID-19 in developing countries. For the next 5 years, KOICA will work with our partner countries to address fragility and to build resilience against various shocks and crises. Now more than ever before, our responsibility is closely intertwined. Global challenges require knowledge sharing and collaboration between all countries. This crisis offers a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finally move away from an old paradigm of international donor-recipient aid toward a model of international cooperation, independent from income per capita. We should not miss this opportunity. Changing the zeitgeist is truly a once-in-a-lifetime kind of chance. Let me close my speech by delivering my gratitude to Representative Mr. Gamborja Bazanjaf of ESCAP, all participants, and related staff members for putting today's event together. I sincerely hope that all participants have constructive discussions today. KOICA will listen to your valuable insights and reflect them on its strategy and policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vice President. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to KOICA for supporting the idea to organize this webinar from the very beginning. Now I'm pleased to invite Mr. Gong Yuanxi, Vice President of China Agricultural University, to give a special welcome.
Okay, thank you. Your Honorable Mr. Gambot Bazayev, Ms. Baek Song-hee, Mr. Tian Ling, dear colleagues and friends, good afternoon. I'm honored to address this webinar on Northeast Asia Development Cooperation against COVID-19 pandemic. For the past 6 months, the coronavirus has disrupted the operation of schools and universities, changing lives of people to the extent never seen in the history. At the moment, while many countries have brought the crisis under control, there are still a lot of things about people's livelihood and social development we should take into consideration, such as food security, poverty reduction, and employment. Regional cooperation could be an effective solution to the challenges raised by the global pandemic. Therefore, it is important to organize such a timely webinar to call for joint efforts to cope with challenges the world is faced with. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office for partnering with us, China International Development Cooperation Agency, and Korea International Cooperation Agency for your support to this webinar. I also thank all of partners and friends from China International Development Research Network, Korea Association of International Development Cooperation, Japan Society for International Development, Asia Development Bank, and the Filipino Institute for Development Studies, China Agriculture University is the top agriculture university in China and moves into global top 4 in agriculture sciences for the last 5 years by US News and World Report. The university boasts international exchange and cooperation with 242 universities in 52 countries with a mission to tackle the problems people face, cultivate the talents the world needs. The College of International Development and Global Agriculture can date back to 1980s when CAU established the Center for Integrated Agriculture Development. Over the past 3 decades, the team has worked with various international and international development organizations to cooperative aid programs in China. International CIDCA's best practices for community-based poverty reduction is small technology with big harvest in Tanzania, highlighted at the second high-level UN conference in South-South cooperation in 2019. The college is listed as the core think tank by CIDCA in 2020. CAU is committed to serve China's international development cooperation and group development improvement. We believe that through close collaboration such as this, experts from all over the world may freely share experience on fighting the pandemic to protect the people, nation in the context of global security. I wish the webinar a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President Gong. Now I'd like to hand over to Professor Xu Su Li to moderate the session. Professor Xu is Dean of College of International Development and Global Agriculture and a key member of our partner network, CIDRN. Professor Xu, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gambo de Pisanyev. Thanks, Ms. Beck. Thanks, Mr. Gong. And I think you have already helped us to set a very inspiring start in the opening ceremony. So let's move to the next session. First of all, we'll have 2 presentations from the 2 very important development agencies in this region, and to share how they respond to COVID-19 pandemic and to learning experiences, particularly about approaches, projects of all those official development assistance in this period. So first, let's welcome Mr. Tian Ling, Director General of Department of International Cooperation, China International Development Cooperation Agency, CIDCA. I know in the last several months, even in the last several years, and the CIDCA is received widely attention. So this is a very good opportunity for CIDCA to show how they do this in the field. So now the floor is yours, Ms. Tian Ling.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to join you today at this webinar. As you all know, COVID-19 is the most serious public health emergency we are facing. Over 17 million people have been infected, along with 660,000 deaths worldwide. To fight the virus, our top priority is obviously to enhance international cooperation. COVID-19 has hampered the flow of individuals and cross-border trade, provoked the turmoil on financial markets, and hit hard both the global industry chain and supply chain. Accordingly, a global recession is inevitable. To stabilize and recover the world economy and help developing countries tide over this crisis, international development cooperation is, of course, a must. We are here today at this webinar to share our updates on anti-pandemic aid, reflect on the pandemic's impact on international development cooperation, and seek future cooperation opportunities. I appreciate our hosts for their great coordination work. Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of this year, when China is experiencing its most critical and hardest moment, we received a strong support from the international community. It is deeply appreciated, and of course, the friendship shall be always remembered. With this support and help, the Chinese government and people fought the pandemic with science-based and targeted measures. We eventually managed to turn around the situation with great sacrifices and efforts and achieve remarkable results. In return, we adhere to the philosophy of building a community with a shared future. While endeavoring in fighting the disease, we launched an emergency humanitarian action. This action involves the most intensive aid with the widest coverage since the founding of the People's Republic of China. Chinese President Xi Jinping announced a series of major measures in supporting global anti-pandemic efforts at different summits, such as the extraordinary G20 leaders meeting, opening of the virtual WHA, and the extraordinary China-Africa summit on solidarity against COVID-19. China is going to provide international aid of $2 billion within the next 2 years for countries affected by COVID-19. This would help developing countries to fight the disease and reopen their economy. We have provided medical supplies, such as test kits, PPE, infrared thermometers, ventilators, etc., to over 150 countries and international organizations, such as the African Union, the European Union, and the ASEAN. We also assisted countries in purchasing medical supplies from China. 30 Chinese medical expert teams were assigned to 28 countries to share experience and work with the local medical institutions and experts. Over 70 video conferences on technical exchanges were held, which covered over 100 countries and regions. Our permanent medical teams in 56 countries also gave play to their professional strengths and assisted in the pandemic control. For a long time, China has assisted other developing countries in a large number of public health infrastructure, such as hospitals, clinics, medical centers, which has played a positive role in helping relevant countries to raise their ability to fight against this virus. China supported WHO and other multilateral agencies. We contributed $50 million in 2 batches to WHO for advancing the anti-pandemic ability as well as the public health system of developing countries. We called on G20 to launch COVID-19 assistance initiative and called for better information sharing, policy and action coordination with the support of WHO. China implemented the G20 debt service suspension initiative for the poorest countries, the moratorium on debt payments by 77 developing countries, and the exemption of relevant African countries from paying interest-free loans to China maturing in late 2020 were announced. China commits to contribute to the accessibility and affordability of COVID-19 vaccines as global public goods in developing countries after its successful application. This year marks the 70th anniversary of China's foreign aid. For 7 decades, upholding the spirit of internationalism and humanitarianism, China, as a developing country itself, has provided assistance within its ability to other developing countries within the framework of South-South cooperation. This large-scale anti-pandemic aid by China is based on its consistent diplomacy and tradition without political conditions. It is not meant for outputting the China model, nor about seeking geopolitical benefits. The aid shows that Chinese people share the suffering amid this pandemic, honoring the cultural tradition of reciprocity. China is acting as a responsible major country, and we believe that the 70th anniversary of China's foreign aid can be best honored by this action. Ladies and gentlemen, this pandemic has a profound impact on the world and our cooperation. People in the developing countries are faced with more severe challenges as their rights to survive and develop, as well as in achieving the UN 2030 agenda. Also, while the pandemic has dealt a heavy blow to the global economy, funds for international cooperation will face a widened gap between supply and demand. Many challenges will take place, many changes will take place in capital distribution and flow. Some countries will be less interested in international development cooperation. We also noticed that some countries and media outlets politicize the international anti-pandemic cooperation. They made up false statements, unfounded accusations of WHO, and discredited the efforts of aid made by other countries. We believe that it is not conducive for maintaining a sound atmosphere for international development cooperation, nor conducive for multilateralism and humanitarianism. International cooperation, development cooperation, is a noble cause. At this critical moment in human history, we have an important task to adapt to new situations, welcome new challenges, and contribute to health and development of mankind. At the following points, I would like to share with you. First, strengthen collaboration and fight the pandemic together. China will always honor to its commitment, fully implement the foreign aid measures announced by President Xi. We will provide medical supplies, conduct medtech cooperation, assign expertise within our capacity according to the demand. China will continue to help developing countries, notably African countries, enhance public health management and build a global community of health for all. Of course, we call upon the international community to put lives first, oppose the politicization of the pandemic and the leveling of the virus, abandon racism and ideological prejudices. We need to provide more funds and more technical support to developing countries. Second, safeguard multilateralism and support WHO. WHO made great contributions to anti-pandemic cooperation across the world. Supporting WHO means supporting international anti-pandemic cooperation and supporting saving lives. China will continue to support WHO to play a leading and coordinating role. We hope that the international community to maintain the global governance system with the UN at its core and provide more political support and invest more to WHO. China will continue to support multilateral mechanisms such as G20, APEC, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organizations to strengthen communication and carry out international cooperation of this pandemic control. Third, fulfill responsibilities and obligations to contribute to global development. The post-pandemic era presents severe challenges to both developing countries and developed countries. Only by making concerted efforts and fulfilling common but differentiated responsibilities can we tide over the crisis together. China, as the largest developing country, will continue to conduct international cooperation within the framework of South-South cooperation. We will combine the Belt and Road Initiative and UN 2030 agenda. Moreover, we will target poverty alleviation and improve people's livelihood. Join hands with all countries to tackle public health crisis and economic recession. We will safeguard the stable and smooth industrial chain and supply chain and reopen the global economy. We call upon developing countries to assume their responsibilities, fulfill their promises in ODA in a timely and adequate manner, and support developing countries to explore the development paths based on their own conditions. We expect that developing countries will further promote South-South cooperation in a more united and stronger way. We support the UN and other international organizations to give full play to its strengths, facilitate information sharing and coordination with all parties, and promote cooperation through multilateral channels. We also encourage private sectors, NGOs, charity organizations, and other stakeholders to play a bigger role. China will increase its communication with other countries and international organizations, explore and conduct a triangular cooperation based on respecting the sovereignty and the will of the recipient countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are confident that as long as the international community sticks to the spirit of solidarity, cooperation, responsibility, and action, will prevail over the COVID-19, will get through these hard times in human history, so as to embrace a brighter future. I thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you all.
Mr. Tianlin, you give us a very, the speech is very informative and is very encouraging. I think the message is very clear that firstly, we introduce that as a developing country, we first receive support from the international community, and then later we provide support as well, to the international. And secondly, to provide a very comprehensive way, multilateral, bilateral, and not only technical cooperation, but also experiences sharing. So it's very, very comprehensive. And thirdly, it's for the build up a community of a shared future. So that the goal is very clear. And lastly, you provide a very strong commitment to development cooperation and is pursued for global development. So I think the message is very clear. Thank you very much, Ms. Tianlin. And next, let's welcome Mr. Kim Hong-Yong, and Director General of Climate Crisis and Pandemic Response Department of Korea International Cooperation Agency. And now the floor is yours, Ms. Kim.
Thank you very much. I will use the presentation file. So yeah, it's prepared. I'm very pleased to meet you all through this webinar. I'd like to express my gratitude to those who have prepared for today's important meeting first. Through my presentation, I will explain KOICA's COVID-19 response program with some case stories. This is the COVID-19 global trend and the situation in Korea based on latest statistics. After the pandemic declaration, KOICA safely returned home more than 2,000 people who were dispatched to the partner countries all over the world without any accidents, fortunately. Most were volunteers and experts. However, the 44 country offices still have KOICA employees on site. Thinking about our role as a development cooperation organization that needs to contribute to global pandemic crisis response and human security, KOICA launched the Emergency Management Strategy Task Force at the end of March and presented the ABC program in April. Due to the nature of infectious diseases that do not respect borders, global cooperation is essential, and supporting response and resilience of partner country with weak health system through development cooperation is also essential. The Korean government has continued to comment on Korea's role and responsibilities through several occasions, including the G20 Special Summit and the 73rd World Health Assembly. In that context, the government has created a program called ODA Korea, Building Trust, and KOICA is implementing it through the ABC program. ABC means Agenda for Building Resilience Against COVID-19 through Development Cooperation, and its slogan is Save Lives and Safe Livelihoods. This is the framework of the ABC program. KOICA's COVID-19 Response Development Cooperation Program aims to contribute to strengthening global human security through development cooperation, utilizing activities from three perspectives, A, B, and C, and which are action on fragility, building capacity, and comprehensive cooperation. There are short-term response plan and mid to long-term resilience plan for each sub-program. The first sub-program, Action on Fragility, includes the aspects of vaccine diagnostics, treatments, and support for the vulnerable. In short term, KOICA support providing diagnostic kits according to the government's decision. Since there is no vaccines and treatments yet for COVID-19, KOICA is also supporting global cooperation efforts with the international health organizations. In the middle of the slide, it is the diagnostic kits box that was shipped in frozen state and arrived in the Philippines. The next picture is an online training program related to diagnosis. The picture below shows the cases of KOICA-supported health facilities in responding to COVID-19. In addition, KOICA is focusing its efforts on promoting timely support using existing projects or various local networks. In the Philippines, for example, rice produced through the Panay Rural Development Project, which was one of the selected as the best development cooperation project in the region, was provided to ensure livelihoods of the vulnerable, including the urban poor. The picture next to it shows you delivering the mask to the Guatemala Police Agency in a situation where it is difficult to purchase masks while performing in the front line of COVID-19 response. We had linked the mask produced by local partner of textile companies in the region as part of our activities to supporting KOICA Alumni Association in partner countries. In the scene from Uzbekistan TV broadcasting scene, KOICA has been carrying out two projects to strengthening the infectious diseases control capacity in Uzbekistan since 2019 until 2019. And as an extension, KOICA has supported this expert dispatch. As a result of emergence consultation, the Uzbek government actively reflected the opinions and advice and established a special coordination committee that integrate COVID-19 response management in the government level and revised related standards and prepared new guidelines, and number of confirmed cases up to 160 or more per day fell down about 30 within those advisory period. And in the bottom of the picture, right-hand side, you can see one Vietnamese fisherman. He lost his arm after landmine exploded when while catching fish in the river. He was originally supported by KOICA with those robot arm through mine removal and victim support project of KOICA previously. However, due to COVID-19, it became difficult to make a living again, and KOICA provided emergency daily necessities this time. And second sub-program, building capacity, is in line with the IHL or Global Health Security Agenda. It includes prevention, early detection, and rapid response. In 2015, Korean government committed to support $100 million for Global Health Security Agenda already, and KOICA has been supporting partner countries in terms of lab capacity building, epidemiological training, and immunization. Also, KOICA have a diverse portfolio in health sector over almost in 30 years of the history, including health system strengthening. From preventive campaign activities to epidemiological investigators, we are actively participating in overcoming COVID-19. KOICA also launched a new knowledge sharing service as an information hub that provides relevant news and data and materials on COVID-19 responses. We will continue to update videos, manuals, and news provided by government ministries or international organizations, so please feel to visit. And the third sub-program, comprehensive cooperation, emphasizes solidarity of global civil society, sharing lesson learned and utilizing relevant technology, innovative technology. Through a whole of government approach, Korean government and including KOICA held webinars on various topics such as economic policy, education, election, police, immigration, or utilization of ICT, coping with COVID-19, in addition to the health sector itself, to share our experience in Korea with colleagues in all over the world. KOICA supported also local NGOs and community networks in the field to help them participate in mask production. In addition, KOICA staff and global corporate doctors who are still active in the region continue to do various activities, including supporting the livelihoods of the vulnerable and delivering preventive know-how to local health workers. At the bottom of the picture, you can see the students. Korean e-learning system is being used in Cambodia for students in developing to making sure students still have the opportunity for the education while they cannot go to school due to social distance. It was called Khmer Academy, which was supported as part of the KOICA's inclusive business program. And it's made into the mobile application and has increased accessibility of extra students. And at the bottom of the right-hand side, you can see the Indonesian case. The Indonesian government and KOICA have been working on the online platform for handling public complaints, along with the country's online copyrights registry. More than 23,000 complaints related to COVID-19 were received through the Indonesian government's application between March and June this year. And about 68% were already processed. Before the introduction of this online platform, only 25% of complaints filed in the Indonesian civil service system and were actually handled, and even it's extended for the process. So far, KOICA is supporting partner countries to respond to COVID-19 by utilizing various modalities, resources, and partnerships, and will support strengthening resilience in the mid to long term. Thank you very much for your listening.
Sorry, I get muted. Thank you so much, Ms. Kim. It's very impressive sharing, particularly about the KOICA. I see that 4P, the people, the people and the prosperity and peace is very good. And I also see that the ABC for this pandemic coping, for the actions on fragility and the building capacity and also comprehensive cooperation. So you provide a very good framework for the collaboration already. And I know that in the chat box already have many questions and comments, and they asking questions whether we can development agencies can provide support beyond the health, for infrastructure building, and for whether they support NGOs. But I will leave the time later. We will have a question and answers later. So now let's move to next session. In this session, we will have 5 distinguished professors from a different development cooperation research network, as well as from Development Studies Institute, and also, as well as ADB. And I know that in this region, it's really a very precious asset for this intellectual community. And I'm sure we are very lucky today to have all of you here. And I'm very encouraged to see that we have a China International Development Research Network. We have a Korea Association of International Development and Cooperation. We have a Japan Society for International Development. It's I think it's already very good. I know that we have an annual conference, but in this pandemic, this is very good to open the conferences to more audience, and particularly for the students, we know that this association here. And also we have a Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and also from the Asian Development Bank. And now let's first invite Professor Li Xiaoyun. He's leader chair professor at China Agricultural University. And actually he's also honorary dean of CIDCA at China Agricultural University. He's also chair of China International Development Research Network and the network of Southern think tanks. He works very broadly, both including China's domestic transformation, poverty reduction, NGOs, as well as international community. Professor Li, so the floor is yours. and we welcome your comments. And Professor Lee, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Sue Lee. Hi, Guybord and Tianling and everyone. Mrs. King, my friend Yamagata, and my friend Mr. Wu from Korea, and Celia. Very nice to see Celia here. And I like to having listened to all the previous distinguished speakers. I'd like to offer you some of my observations and to discuss some of the issues that we could learn from international development cooperation perspective. First one is that the outbreak of COVID-19 actually exposed quite obviously the vulnerability of our human system itself. And it once again reminds us that we need to really take a very proactive approach, which I try to emphasize that approach should be very much depoliticized to move ahead to build, as what previous speaker mentioned, that to build up again the resilience system that our human system could be able to cope with any kind of crisis, unexpected crisis. And this resilience building, as long as I can see, to build this resilient building requires first collaboration at different scales. And the scales we talk about global scale, and the scale we talk about regional scale, and the scale we talk about the sub-regional scale, which our region, Northeast Asia region. We've been working together, Mr. Gamble. We've been working over the last few years, and so Japanese and Korea and Russia and Mongolia are our friends. We've been working, and I very fortunately, and I have personally been to a member of this initiative for the last few years. So the main objective of this sub-regional initiative talk about international development cooperation field was actually to strengthen this kind of collaboration, to build what I call not very much based on the country's interest, not much based on the regional interest, but more broadly global interest, which now today we see the huge impact, and we see the huge negative impact from this sudden outbreak of the pandemic. From this point of view, I would say, look, and the pandemic of COVID-19, we have gone through the outbreak at the beginning of January, February, March, and we all experience this terrible feeling and the inconvenience created through the lockdown of the countries. So we are so much disconnected. Luckily, we have this new technology to connect us again through this screen. So it is absolutely tragedy for everybody. Now it is time for us to review different measures, different strategies. And I will not take anything based on country or political system. I would see a human system. I use the word I call human system. Development cooperation is one of the most effective way to keep us bond together. It is a system which is not much from its right beginning. Everybody talk about international development cooperation. It is the political system. It's one of the political system. It is very much depoliticized. It is true. But again, if we take a nature of the cooperation itself, And international development cooperation primarily derives from a human nature need, from the need of our human nature, from the need of building a system which we can jointly cope with crisis. So I like to the big lessons from this from this outbreak and the lockdown of the COVID-19 over last almost 6 months, almost 7 months. It will continue. It obviously still continue. And the big lesson we learned is that we need cooperation. And it is time for us, let me just reiterate again, it is time for us to really emphasize that international development cooperation, which we have created, how we could use that, how we could use that tool to strengthen this collaboration. And for that, take that perspective, I would say, over last 10 to even 20 years, there have been increased recognition and awareness that East Asia, Northeast Asia countries, that we had kind of a consensus that Northeast Asia countries shared very similar development trajectory and created very similar development experiences. Therefore, we had provided very similar way how to work with other people in the field of development, and there had been an increasing tendency that the countries within the region will work together. So our undertake through the working with ESCAP has really supported that kind of direction, undertake that direction. And I'm quite convinced what we have built over last few years should continue to support each country's effort, and also should continue to support our sub-regional effort to work together to cope with this new crisis. And it is obvious, that it's non-traditional. These non-traditional security issues, criminal security issues, will come to a very, very critical stage for our human life. Therefore, it will actually strengthen clearly the realization of our SDG in the future. And from that perspective, I would like to call for further collaboration and support this initiative and this platform in the 2 areas. First area is that what experiences and what lessons we learned from the process that Northeast Asia countries accumulated over last few months and continue to create, to share with other people. And secondly, I like to call for possible actions among our partners within our network here to consider that how we can share in the collective way. I like to strengthen. I would like to call from our KOICA friend, JICA friend, and our Japanese friend from governmental organizations as well as from non-government organizations work together to utilize our sub-regional advantage to share our special experiences, both culturally, technically, socially, within the region and with the countries outside the region. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to working continuously with all of you in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Yeah, you share with us that the pandemic provided unconditional security issue, and it's to our human system. So that's a very big concept, but I think it's very important, and particularly emphasize about the sub-regional, particularly in the East and Northeast Asia area, for build up resilience and for build up connectivity. And cooperation is very important during the process. So I think today is the very big start in the future. So and the next, let's welcome Professor Kong Hanju And he is the professor of Korea Association of International Development and Cooperation and a professor at Seoul National University. And his research interest is in global social policy, international development cooperation, and a political theory of social policy. And he was co-editor of a global social policy. And he's published a book on transformation of a development welfare state in East Asia, and also implications of the sustainable development goals for global social policy. So now the floor is yours, Professor Kun. We would like to hear from your perspective.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I keep this presentation for my discussion, and my discussion is about more long-term and the macro perspective after COVID-19 pandemic. So our presentation already discussed about health issues and immediate response to COVID-19, but I think it's also necessary to think about the longer-term impact of COVID-19 and how we respond in terms of the social and economic livelihood recovery in the developing countries. Well, I'm not going to go through all these details of global pandemic of COVID-19, but just the thing I like to point out is that we see a difference in the capability to respond to COVID-19, and also it was a big surprise for us and for everyone that some of the advanced countries find it very difficult to cope with COVID-19, but some of the countries like Korea, Germany, and other developing countries has responded well compared to other countries. But what is really clear is that it will be a huge impact on poverty in developing countries. So how we respond to this poverty increase will be also a very important challenge in the longer term. Of course, the immediate response to COVID-19 is very important, and the COVID-19 is still with us, so we don't really forget the more emergent issues, but my suggestion is that we also need to think about the longer term recovery, especially in the context of developing countries. So if I just go back to a few months ago, the Asian developing country, East Asian developing countries, they responded very well. I think even though their capacity was very weak, but their response to the pandemic was very swift and also very decisive. I think that is very, very important that East Asia compared to other regions, we seems to control to some extent of this pandemic. But we have this economic and social impact. So in the developing countries. So some of the developing countries who are integrated well into global economy will severely hit by this global pandemic aftermath. The formal workers as well, but informal workers will also have a very, very difficult situation. And not only inside the countries, but I think we will see many developing countries have this reduction of international migrant workers. These are the people not only get income, but also they are the source of the finance of developing projects in many developing countries. The other thing we need to think about is increase of poverty in developing countries and how we response to this increase in poverty. And some of the countries in East Asia really responded well. I think I just like to point out these 4 cases. In the Philippines, the 4P program were actively implemented to give a cash transfer to the poor. Indonesia, Mongolia, and Vietnam. These are the cases of this cash transfer. So to support the poor people to cope with this emergent situation. But I like to point out that these countries not just to respond to this crisis, but this 4P program, PKH program, Indonesia, in fact, was instituted 10 years ago after global economic crisis. So the lesson we learn from this is that not just immediate response, I think we need to build institutions so that we can build a resilience, and also we can have a capacity to respond to this emergency crisis. The other thing, I'm sorry I have to move quick, but just I'd like to mention about this the issue in the missing middle class. We're talking about the support for the poor people, and also we think about the long-term economic impact on the global economy, national economy, but not only poor people, but in many developing countries as well as developed countries, the middle class also hit by the pandemic crisis very, very severely. So how can we respond to these missing middle issues? Well, I know that many people have this idea of universal basic income, but I have a very strong reservation about this, because this may be popular for politicians, but this is not a longer term situation response. My suggestion is that when we have this immediate crisis, I think we can respond to this provisional program. But to address the issue of middle class, I think we should build the institution of welfare state bit by bit. So as we see in Indonesia, in the Philippines, as also we can see in the Korean case, the building social protection system, the welfare system, is actually addressing the issue of middle class. So that is my suggestions. So if I just summing up my discussion, we should think about the short term, middle term, and the longer term. So the first, we still need to immediate crisis of health issues, and also we need to build the capacity to prevent further the infection expansion. But also we need to think about in the middle term about how to support the poor people to recover from this crisis. But in the longer term, I think we need to think about the national economy and also global economy to recover. And but because of this pandemic, we need more global collaboration, but it will be difficult to continue to global collaborations, multilateral collaboration, because of this pandemic issue itself. So our challenge will be very difficult. We should know that, but I think we should continue to increase our collaboration at the international and the global level. Well, thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Professor Kun. You provide a very good framework for coping system, and particularly you emphasize the short term, middle term, and the long term, and to build up a resilience. So thank you so much. And next, let's move to Professor Yamagata Tatsufumi. And he is also a professor of the College of Asian Pacific Studies of Risumikan Asian Pacific University in Japan. And he has been president of Japan Society for International Development, JASID, since 2017. And I know that you just published the book titled Sustainable Development Goals and Japan, Sustainability Overshadow the Poverty Reduction. It's a very powerful statement. We will hear more, particularly in the pandemic, where there is overshadowed again by pandemic. So welcome, Professor Yamagata.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yamagata. It's my great pleasure to be one of the speakers. Seeing the list of participants in this panel as well as event, I found that I'm the only one Japanese, and no one was supposed to talk about Japan's assistance on the COVID-19. So that even though I'm a discussant, I decided to brief as much as possible some features of Japan's assistance in the context of COVID-19. Let me share screen with you. All right.
Yes, we can see it very clear.
Yeah. All right. Then probably you might think that JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, represents Japan's assistance for COVID-19, but it's not the case because JICA is coordinated closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Finance. And at this time, the main ministry of Japan working for COVID-19 is the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare. I would talk about two aspects of Japan's international cooperation to cope with COVID-19. And May 18 and 19 this year, there was an annual assembly of the World Health Organization. At that occasion, the Minister of Health, Labor, and Welfare of Japan, Mr. Kato, released the following plan of funding to WHO CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness, Innovation, and Gavi. The Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare takes charge of funding to those multilateral donors on behalf of Japan. You know, JICA has a health project which might cover some parts of COVID-19 issues. But as long as COVID-19 specific funding is concerned, the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare declare that through the ministry, Japan would grant 3 destinations of the international organizations, which are WHO, CEPI, and Gavi. And there was a Gavi's summit, which was called Global Vaccine Summit 2020 on June 5th. There, the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe appeared online and made a speech, then augmented the amounts of contribution to Gavi. So firstly, the Minister Kato, the Minister of Health, Labor, and Welfare, announced that $100 million US will be provided to Gavi for 5 years. However, the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe added 200 million more. So this is one, sets of contribution of Japan for the specific targets of COVID-19. There is a second interesting, noteworthy cooperation of Japan in the context of COVID-19, which is supply of anti-COVID-19 medicine, which is named Abigan. Abigan was developed by Japanese pharmaceutical firms, Fujifilm. Fujifilm was once known as a camera film making company, but Fujifilm's camera film business went down. Then Fujifilm somehow found another company for merger and acquisition. Then that particular company developed Abigan, which is basically anti-influenza drug. However, one interesting issue is that when Ebola outbroke in West Africa in 2014, somehow Abigan was found so-called effective, not 100% statistically confirmed, but still there was a hope such that Abigan might be effectively working for Ebola. Then government of Japan started thinking that Abigan is a symbol of Japan's cooperation in line with the universal health coverage, as well as a public-private partnership. Then in the context of COVID-19, Abigan still is considered as one of a potential possible effective medicine, even though the effect is not 100% confirmed yet. So at this stage, the government of Japan decided to make emergency grant aid of Abigan to 80 countries for the purpose of clinical trial through the United Nations Office for Project Services, UNOPS. Because the background reasoning is clinical trial, the scale is not great, such as those for 2,000 patients each, so that the scale is very small. And the amount of grant is $1 million, so that this is not big. But in terms of the modality, this is considered as one of interesting PPP, public-private partnership oriented cooperation of Japan. On top of them, there are some health-oriented JICA projects which need not to be effective only for COVID-19, but those would be also expected to be effective. Health projects are there. Then, in addition to that, recently Japan released that $5 billion emergency budget support program to Asian and the Pacific countries. This is now ongoing program, so that I don't have much information to elaborate it today. But those two, supply of anti-COVID-19 medicine and funding to international organizations through the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, two ways, specifically highlighting COVID-19 countermeasures from Japan. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yamagata. You can finish the screen sharing. And thanks really very much. As we know that we look forward for JICA, but we got the information that actually Japan's funding for COVID-19 through the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. So this is the information is very important. And also you introduced lots of the message from the medicine and vaccine providing, and this is very important. And I know that lots of you have already talked about, many developing countries and in this region, and as well as, so we move to next session about, we invite Professor Celia Reyes, President of Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and to share her idea. And Professor Celia Reyes is now he specialized in the field of econometrics and has conducted and published numerous research and policy papers on poverty assessment and evaluations of social protection programs. She is also the network leader of a community-based monitoring system and served as president of the Philippine Economic Society in 2011 and has been an advisor to various national government technical working groups on poverty monitoring and indicator system. And we're looking forward, we see that we will have more of data from the national monitoring system on poverty. And so welcome, Professor Celia Reyes.
Thank you. And thank you to the conference organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my views. I'll share my screen. So I hope you can see this.
Yes, we can. It's clear.
Okay, and as we have seen, actually, the COVID-19 pandemic has reached crisis proportion with 16.3 million cases and over 650,000 deaths in a span of 7 months. Latin America and the Caribbean has the highest number of cases at 4.5 million, followed by Northern America at 4.4 million. Asia is close behind at 4 million. In Asia, India has the highest at 1.5 million, and the Philippines now has about 85,000 cases. What's I think alarming is that COVID-19 is not going to go away soon, as projections from the University of Minnesota shows. It's expected to stay until January 2022 unless a vaccine is developed soon and distributed widely. And moreover, while some countries have been able to slow down the contagion, many countries are still facing increasing number of cases, including the Philippines. In Asia, India has the highest number of daily cases at over 48,000 as of yesterday, while the Philippines had 1,600 cases yesterday based on World Health Organization data. So we can see that actually developed and developing countries are all suffering from the pandemic, yet these countries do not have the same resources to deal with the pandemic. So far, some countries have responded effectively to the crisis, and these best practices need to be shared with everyone. And I'd just like to briefly mention some of these best practices, but some of our panelists here are more familiar with them, because I'm citing some examples from their countries. So for instance, in the case of New Zealand, what they found is that the key learning from China is really speed. So the faster that you can find the cases, isolate the cases, and track their close contacts, the more successful you're going to be. And this has helped influence New Zealand's strategy to go early and go hard. From late February through March, the country progressively tightened restrictions. It was recognized that implementing this strategy would have significant economic cost, but so would a major outbreak. So New Zealand took a precautionary approach, and on 26 March, apart from essential workers, the entire country was required to self-quarantine at home. And this strategy has actually been adopted by by many countries. Now, in terms of supporting the healthcare system, I think we find the best practice from some of our colleagues in Vietnam. The Ministry of Health has issued national guidelines for infection prevention and control for COVID-19 acute respiratory disease in healthcare establishments. And this document provides comprehensive guidance to hospitals on screening, admission, and isolation of confirmed or suspected cases, establishment of isolation areas in hospitals, use of personal protective equipment, cleaning and disinfection of environmental surfaces, waste management, collection, preservation, packing and transport of patient samples, prevention of laboratory-acquired infection of COVID-19, and so forth. And what we're finding is that these protocols are actually could be shared with other countries and could help them manage the pandemic better. In the case of ICT and big data approach, I think the Republic of Korea has developed several applications to facilitate contact tracing and to monitor movements of confirmed patients, among others. Very impressed with the number of applications that have been developed, including, for instance, the coronavirus map app that informs users of the movements of confirmed patients. And also you have the Now and Here app, as well as the Quebec app that sends an alarm when users are within 100 meters of a place that a confirmed patient visited. Of course, Vietnam has also used technology to monitor cases. And in addition, Vietnam has also adopted extensive testing. So when community transmission was detected, the government reacted quickly with contact tracing, commune-level lockdowns, and widespread local testing to ensure no cases were missed. This helps explain why Vietnam has performed more tests per confirmed case than any other country in the world. Next. And for the Philippines, we're actually very grateful for the assistance provided by our development partners. These are just some examples, and I think we've heard from our presenter from Korea, the assistance provided by South Korea, and we've also received, these are just some examples, but we received assistance. But I think in addition to these material donations, the sharing of best practices on how to deal with the pandemic is valuable as well. Knowledge sharing, technical assistance, and sharing of technologies are equally important in dealing with new shocks. We would benefit from ICT applications to facilitate contact tracing, monitoring of cases, and so forth. At this stage, we're all eagerly awaiting the results regarding testing of vaccines. We need the vaccines to stop the spread of COVID-19. And there are several that have reached clinical trial stage. I think as of currently, there are about 26 that have reached clinical trial stage, and about 6 have reached phase 3, which is the last stage before approval. And they say that a vaccine can be made available before the end of this year. The hope is that the vaccine can be made available to everyone at affordable price. And this is one of the critical areas for development cooperation. I'm glad to hear from Mr. Tian Lin about China's commitment to share with developing countries the vaccine that it is developing. Development cooperation to contain the COVID-19 pandemic are important at this point. However, cooperation to make the systems, particularly the health systems, more resilient to other pandemics and other shocks are important as well. Thus, I am pleased to see that Korea has shared in its presentation that it will focus on building resilient systems in 2022 to 2024. Moreover, Korea has identified the conduct of research and lessons learned from Korea's response. I think this research should go beyond Korea. Research on how countries have dealt with this pandemic needs to be conducted to help us come up with lessons learned, what to do and what not to do in similar situations in the future. Finally, let me just mention that global output is projected to decline by 5.2% this year, according to the World Bank. This is in sharp contrast to the 2.7% growth projected a year ago for 2020. The contraction in the world economy is a result of the lockdowns and restrictions imposed due to COVID-19, which has closed businesses and disrupted global value chains. Some economies now have started to reopen, And when the vaccine becomes available, the rest of the economies will follow. Businesses will reopen, but under a new normal. A full recovery is not yet expected by 2021, as the global economy is projected to grow by only 4.2% in 2021. With increased poverty due to the pandemic, greater development cooperation is needed to accelerate the recovery of many of these countries and put us all back on track. This calls for going back to supporting programs that would respond to problems that were there even before COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Celia Reyes. You provided very data on the Asia countries, not only in Philippines, but also in India, Bangladesh, all these Asia countries, but also share how the experiences collected in this area, like go early and go hard, and supporting the healthcare system and ICT system, which has been actually raised by the audience in the chat box many times. And infrastructure building to build up connectivity is very important. And this session is also a very good platform for each guest to share your suggestions for the future, probably in the questions and answers as well. So that's a reminding. Thank you so much, Professor. And next, our last discussant is Mr. Maza Lawrence, and I know that you have a very beautiful Chinese name, Meng Zhiya, and I love it. It's really beautiful. And you are now the head and economic and strategy unit, PRC residence mission to Asian Development Bank, and she is principal country specialist and currently working on many projects in India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. And you have more than 20 years of professional experiences in project, program, and portfolio related work in development field, including extensive field work. And for 10 years, you led multidisciplinary teams throughout the project cycle. So I think you are really experienced in development cooperation practices, even though that we talk a lot intellectually at a very macro level. So we look forward also from a practical level, and particularly from Asian Development Bank, development finance, and how would you see this coping strategy, and what's the pandemic will have an impact on the development landscape? Thank you.
Professor Xu, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting ADB. We are very pleased to be here. And what I will do, I will present what ADB response has been to the COVID-19 outbreak. And while doing so, I will tackle some of the issues that everybody has highlighted in terms of development cooperation and in terms of the need for mix of financial resources, technical expertise, and knowledge. So let me share my presentation. Let me know if you can see it. Okay? All
yeah,
right.
very clear.
Okay. So, the institutional response of ADB to the COVID-19 outbreak has been at the first stage, a rapid support in the very early stage of the outbreak back in January and February, which included a resource envelope of about $70 million of grant resources for immediate actions by the government to flatten the curve, including the purchase of emergency medical supplies and health kits and the delivery of effective healthcare services. This initial response was followed by a $20 billion package announced in April, which has been covering different type of responses depending on the type of development stage of the member countries. It was mentioned that the poorer and most vulnerable countries need different intervention, and that's why we included in our financial package concessional and grant resources for the most vulnerable countries, which include emergency food programs and medical needs, includes wage support schemes for low-wage workers to help small firms stay in business and prevent job loss, which has been highlighted in the previous presentation being a huge issue for the economies. We also include cash transfer schemes and other social protection schemes targeting the poor and vulnerable groups and households, including women and girls, and including reducing domestic violence as a result of the lockdowns. This has been one of the interventions that we had in Mongolia. And while one example of emergency medical needs is, I can mention is from China. ADB funded the preparation of a lab for COVID-19 that was brought to the Philippines. So these are some examples for our intervention. We also have a big portion of our package is for quick and affordable budget support to help our member countries counter the macroeconomic impacts arising from the pandemic with counter-cyclical expenditure, with again focus on the poor and the vulnerables. This has been used in Mongolia, not in China. We also have, as part of the package, very much loans and guarantees for the private sector. And this is to support the trade and supply chains and the economic recovery. So we mention very much, the public, the private, and, the need of these platforms to include everybody, the public, the private, and the civil society. So the package wanted to deliver these multiple stakeholders for the recovery and the response to the outbreak. We also have very much, in addition to the finance, we have ramped up our knowledge services for COVID-19. We have ongoing economic analysis, and this is to help policymakers to better plan for recovery. We also have created a lot of tools for our countries to, for instance, assess the economic impact. We have a template on our website the countries can download and then assess the impact of the lockdowns. We have a policy database on the responses of all the countries in the world to COVID-19. Again, this is online. You can access from the website and download the experience from other countries and see how they responded to COVID-19. We also have developed an interactive map for equipping banks, investors, governments, and healthcare professionals with the information they need to procure critical medical supplies. And then in addition, we also have a lot of publication articles, brief blogs, events, and webinars to discuss lessons learned, which was mentioned earlier very often. We are trying to share a lot of the lessons learned from our member countries to other member countries and to beyond the Asian region. One example, which I'll discuss later, is our ADB CIKD webinar series on COVID-19 experience. We also have very much given importance to coordination with international financial institutions. This is to share information. For instance, we have weekly meetings with the WHO. We coordinate to avoid duplication of efforts. Resources are limited, so we need to really use them carefully. We cooperate together for co-financing. For instance, one of our projects in Mongolia has been co-financed with the AIIB from Beijing. And then we also put together our technical expertise and knowledge to design better projects. For instance, our project for the health security in China, where we are designing right now, we are working together with WHO and FAO in terms of technical expertise. We also have revised some internal policies, and this is because we wanted to enhance our business processes. And we had a lot of board approval policy variation to have new products that included health emergencies. And this is has been done very quickly in order to be responsive to the needs of our member countries. We also have taken actions to fast track business processes in terms of processing faster our loans, sovereign loans, our non-sovereign loans, and our technical assistance. We also had mobilized staff within any part of the bank that was needed to respond to the COVID-19. Okay, as it was mentioned at the beginning, I am from the East Asia department, which covers China and Mongolia. And as you know, it's very different countries in terms of development stage. For this, we had to have a tailored approach to our response to COVID. And you will see for China, we have 4 types of actions. We repurpose ongoing operations to include COVID-19 activities. We are preparing a new key operation, our first health operation in a long time on strengthening health security in China, which will be approved in February next year. And this is, will highlight the regional public good of this intervention. We also have expanded one of our regional health cooperation in the Greater Mekong sub-region, and this is very much linked to the issue that this health security is a regional public good, and it has to be in coordination with other countries. And also, as you can see, I won't go into details, we have a lot of non-sovereign operation, meaning our loans to private companies. And this large amount of operation is to ensure that the supply chain for critical medical supplies does not get disrupted. For China, I would like sorry, did you lose, can you see my presentation still?
No, it stops.
Oh, apologies for this. Let me restart.
Okay, now it's fine.
Okay, so in terms of China, I would like to highlight two things that we have done. You know, the relationship between ADB and China is 2 ways, and ADB is administering the Poverty Reduction Regional Cooperation Fund, which is funded by the PRC. And the PRC government has decided to earmark a total amount of 10 million to address the coronavirus responses. And this is very much to, again, purchase medical supplies and equipment, but also for health sector reforms. And then again, this is very much at the regional level, not for the PRC. The fund covers regional cooperation in the region. We also have the Regional Knowledge Sharing Initiative in ADB, in our Beijing office, which has organized ADB Center for International Knowledge Development of China, a webinar series on COVID-19 experience and lessons from the PRC. This is, we had so far 3 events, and really we want to share PRC experience and also, you know, shed light on some misinformation on COVID-19 and the experience in the PRC. In terms of Mongolia, we'll move to Mongolia. Again, Mongolia has done well in containing a pandemic, but the economic impact have been severe. And so we have 3 types of intervention in terms of loans and TAs, and they cover more of health intervention, social protection, and budgetary support. As you can see, non-sovereign operations are less dominant compared to the China response. But we have a lot of grants. We have more grants for Mongolia in order to support the country. So I would like to end with an extract from an article which show how development cooperation from multilateral development bank is critical to fight the pandemic. And the net, I think, is very telling. We need to cooperate. But I would like to add to this net and spiders, the fact that we don't need only multilateral development bank, we need the public, we need private, and the civil society communities for collective action. I'll stop here and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Maza. Could you finish this screen sharing? Okay, good. Thank you very much. Development Bank, Asian Development Bank is not only provide funding, but also provide knowledge, but also provide a platform for sharing. So this is very important. I think now we finish all this, the comments and the discussions for responding to the new landscape of post-COVID-19 development cooperation in this region. And the next, actually, we will have a questions and answers session. I would say that first, I will pick up some questions from a chat box as well as collected in the registration form already existing. I should remind that not all of the questions could be responded today, and we hope to keep in contact. And first, I want to say, because I already see some questions. The first is the slides were sharing to the audience. This we would need to asking each participant to asking for their permission. So this we will let you know. If you are interested, you can contact with our secretary. And secondly, you're asking questions, and this development cooperation dialogue is so important and is helpful, and is strategically very, very useful. So they ask whether we will have a regular dialogue. This as a platform, we will organize a policy dialogue on a regular way, like also ESCAP here today. They also organize an annual conference for the development cooperation discussion in this region. And you pay attention to the WeChat official account for CIDCA, our institute as well. We were working with our global partners to have facilitate this communication. And so let's move to the first question we collected for CIDCA, Mr. Tianling. That the one question for you is, how would should the international community strengthen cooperation in fighting the pandemic? And also you have seen lots of some of the questions in chat box. If you would like, and you can answer them all. So, Ms. Tianling.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Xu. Yes, just now in my presentation, I've already touched upon the questions of how should we enhance international cooperation to fight against this pandemic. I think to be brief, I think the first one that we have to conduct effective international cooperation on joint prevention and control. We should follow the guidance of WHO and to work together to support WHO, support the United Nations to play a leading and coordinating role. Secondly, to manage the pandemic impact on world economy and through cooperation. For example, work together to address the deepening global recession, and stepping up the international coordination and macro economic policies, and jointly safeguarding the stable, secure, and smooth operation of the supply chain and industrial chain. Of course, the third one, we have to work together to assist those vulnerable countries in fighting this pandemic. And first of all, to fight this pandemic itself. And second is to address the social and economic problems they are faced with caused by this pandemic. And of course, we have to build an efficient and sustainable global public health system, which is very important. And it is also a lesson that we have learned from this pandemic. I have some questions from the audience, and let me try to answer some of them. The first one is they are very interested in the $2 billion international aid. How should we use that? Honestly speaking, we are still working on it. But according to what President Xi has already made it very clear at the opening of the WHA conference, I think this kind of fund will be composed of two parts. The first part is to directly support those vulnerable countries, African countries in particular, and those least developed countries, to fight against the virus itself. We have many ways to do that. The first one is to provide PPEs, provide test kits, and sending medical teams to exchange, to share our information, share our experience on that. The second part is how do we will help those people and these countries to try to, China cannot take all the responsibilities to help all the other countries, but we will try our best to help them to address those social and economic problems they are faced with caused by this virus, mainly to recover their economy, to address many issues. For example, the food crisis are caused by that. Those crises are caused to women and children by the virus. Some countries even combine with other natural disasters. The third one is those aid will be mainly done by two channels. One is bilateral channels, another one is multilateral channel. I think bilateral channel will be the main channel. We have direct contact with many countries, especially developing countries in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in Pacific regions. And also we attach great importance to our cooperation with international organizations, in particular those organizations within the UN system, through what we call the ESCAP, the South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund, which is managed by my agency, and also through a donation, we will provide our support to international organizations to work together with them to fight against this virus. Second question posed to me is how should we, how China will enhance our cooperation with private sectors and NGOs. Yes, private sectors and NGOs now is very important as the stakeholders in the international development cooperation. For a long time, China's foreign aid and international cooperation, development cooperation, were mainly done through the government-to-government channels. But now we also believe that it is important to engage with those NGOs and engage with the private sectors to work together with them to conduct our foreign aid and international development cooperation. I can give some of the examples. If we can call ICRC an NGO, yes, we are working together with them to conduct some of the South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund project. And also we use this fund to work with one of the Chinese company from private sector to conduct a project to what we call to provide satellite TV accessibility to 10,000 African villages, which has been done for many years. It is a measure announced by President Xi during the FOCAC, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Johannesburg Summit. And now this project is moving on very smoothly. So in the near future, we will also try to use our SCAF, the South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund, to work together with NGOs, private sectors, both from China and both from recipient countries to try to boost our international development cooperation.
Okay, thank you.
And last question, let me be brief, I will not take too much time, is about the disaster, if I understand it correctly, disaster risk reduction. Yes, disaster risk reduction is very important. But whenever in the world there's a disaster, no matter it's a natural disaster like earthquake, like flood, like cyclone, or some health crisis, China's humanitarian assistance will always be there at the first time. And also we will try our best to help those countries to through different channels to help them to enhance their ability to tackle with disasters. For example, we help them to build infrastructures. We provide equipments on disaster risk reduction, and also through training courses. We have many training courses every year, and through training courses, we will help those people to train some professionals in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen Liang. We will welcome you share more ideas in the platform in the future. And considering the time, I would suggest that next I will post question to KOICA, and then after that I will provide the general questions, and then our distinguished guests could be collected which one suit you or in the chat box, and then you give one comment each by each, okay? So I saw that in the chat box and also collect the questions for KOICA is how the strategy, what's the strategy and plan on coping with climate change and pandemic in the dual challenge, and all, you know, what's kind of any ideas for KOICA and CIDCA can work together in this region. So that's a broad question for you, Ms. Kim.
Thank you for the questions. Today, I couldn't explain all the strategy that KOICA already had. Obviously, we also put a lot of importance and emphasis on the climate change and climate crisis response. That's why KOICA itself newly made up our new department itself. So our department handles climate change issues at the same time, infectious diseases, pandemic issues at the same time. So 2 years ago, already, KOICA made up a climate action initiative for our KOICA's own climate change initiative. And we've been prepared for the Green Climate Fund accredited entity registration, and we look forward to getting the green light from the GCF, and we making a lot of pipelines for the feasible projects for the climate change issues. And there is no doubt that when we thinking about recovering from the COVID-19, the way should be more greener one, rather than just go back to the way we lived. So KOICA also a lot of put importance on the climate change issues, and we already have the initiative. However, we trying to adjust and getting a new comprehensive initiative regarding climate crisis consideration for the pandemic issues too. And there were another question regarding digital issues from ITU, I remember. And including the PPP, encouraging PPP or other ideas about bringing expansion of the ODA. When we thinking about the greener options, there automatically comes the digital alternative need to be considered, just like we discussed about the innovative technology, and that comes with the digital strategy too. So those two components are comes together, and that's why I guess when a few weeks ago our government released new policy, the Korean New Deal, and it composed of the Green New Deal and the Digital New Deal. So KOICA also will reflect these type of perspective into when we develop future development cooperation policy. Maybe I'm stop here, and if there is a further issues, I will coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. Thank you very much. And actually the time is almost closed, but I think it's a very valuable opportunity. I should persuade a little bit. So anyway, we have collected a lot of general questions, but relate to a very specific area, like what's the pandemic have impact on the agriculture, climate change, green sectors, public transportations, social protections, and particularly one question is about how to see the utilization of protective clothing, dealing with the waste. And he asked many times, so I would like that any guests you would like to respond to these questions. Professor Lee, would you start? Or you just collect the questions from chat box you would like to answer?
Very quickly, from the general questions, and I'd like to just pick up issue of impact of pandemic on the environment issue and other issues, because this pandemic has really will have a huge impact on changing our lifestyle, including both socially and environmentally. And particularly, you see that in order to prevent the outbreak and the transmission of the virus, we have adopted different technologies and even equipment and materials, which include huge amount of plastic-made materials, which one of our participants raised the issue of how to deal with how to deal with all kind of protective material, which we have been using, we are still using for this one. And this is a serious issue. This will require different paradigm. We are going to recognize, which we've been calling for, called paradigm shift. And this pandemic actually provides a critical watershed, what I call watershed, in terms of our development paradigm. And this is the area where we see future collaboration within the region or within the sub-region. And this is what I also mentioned in my earlier contribution, that within the Northeast Asia development cooperation context, we need really focus. We need to shift, not bit, but significantly from our conventional emphasis on purely developmental approach into a more broad, sustainable development approach, including not only, as I mentioned, resilience and human system resilience, but also for very broadly for sustainable development perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Kwon?
Yes, I also see some of the questions on the chatting. The thing I like to respond is the question that how we justify the ODA during the economic crisis and how we persuade Korean people to give more support to developing countries. I think this is really a difficult question, but we haven't yet really tested the willingness of the Korean citizens to continue or to increase ODA, because it hasn't yet make a big issues yet. But it will be very difficult. But I think we should put our effort to persuade the public to continue our ODA for developing countries. Well, just to finish, I also like to thank you, the organizers, ESCAP and the Chinese colleague, for this very, very good online webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kwon. I think I am sure that our communication will continue. And Professor Yamagata?
Yes, some mentioned the possibility of cooperation among Northeast Asian donors, China, Korea, Japan, Russia. And I think that explicit cooperation might be tough issues, but I think that information sharing, exchange, for example, in this process was very much useful. And I think that at this time with COVID-19, Japan learned a lot from Korea, China, Taiwan, many other neighboring countries and area. Japan realized that there are so many aspects behind of those countries and the area in terms of handling SARS, MERS, those who are not with us, Japan. So that I think this is a good opportunity for the Japanese to innovate, to improve, to learn from neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Reyes, I also saw that someone would like to learn you from the Philippines, but he didn't know which minister will contact. So,
yeah, I'll respond to that because I think that has also implications for other countries. I think what's happening is that there are many agencies involved in responding to the COVID. So in the case of the Philippines, we have the Department of Health responding to health-related issues. We have the Department of Social Welfare and Development responding to safety nets. We have the Department of Interior and Local Government responding to local government unit needs. But there is an interagency task force, which is a temporary body that tries to coordinate these policies. But in terms of a single agency in charge of sharing such experiences, I don't think, in the Philippines, there's none. And I don't think that there's also, it's not likely that there's also one agency in other countries in charge of sharing such experiences. So I think this forum that we're having right now, and probably others that might be conducted in the future, is actually one way of learning from all of these experiences. Although I'd like to reiterate that the research, as I mentioned earlier, on documenting and assessing responses, so that we learn from the pandemic, the current pandemic, and we would know what to do next time. Hopefully there's no next time, but in case it happens, another shock happens, we're better prepared. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Reyes. And Mantia.
Yes, there is a very specific question on how ADB became faster in processing its loans and TAs. Actually, it's a good question because it is a struggle for institutions like ADB to expedite business processes. Because we have heavy due diligence and safeguards requirements, which have to stay there. While shortening other processes. So what we have done, it's a lot of very small items that have been changed. But I'll give you an example. For instance, we have waived a lot of steps along the project approval. And for instance, once we have a project proposal ready, we should have, we so-called it interdepartmental review, which take maybe a couple of weeks or if not more. And so we have waived this as far as teams are made as one ADB team, which include people, staff from different departments. And so that counts as a interdepartmental review. So that's a very small example. But I would like to conclude maybe from my side, looking forward, how this will impact ADB is very much on increasing and the focus on health operations, which actually have been a very small percentage of ADB operations overall. So this has put more focus, a new focus, rejuvenated focus on health issues. And also the way we look at, we have a lot of climate change, which was mentioned earlier. We have focus on environment, and the way we are now looking at our investments and our knowledge work on environment is to really look at the overall ecosystem, including humans, animals, and environment. So this is, I think, will have a big impact also the way we work in the future. And and in the medium term, we know very well, given the lockdowns and the impact on the economic situation, we need to really emphasize our work on supporting SMEs, tackling joblessness, and getting economy back into their feet. So I'll stop here from
Thank
now.
you.
Thank you very much again for the
Samantha. And also, I finished my job actually, and thanks all for your patience to me. I didn't get it's very punctual, but I think because it's a so valuable platform, so everyone would like to talk more, and that's a good signal that we still are willing to talk and to communicate and keep it open. So I'm very happy for this, and thank you all for the audience. I will hand over to Mr. Gambo, the Besanya. For now, it's your turn to closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. So with this insightful and rich exchanges, so I'll bring this webinar to a close. The development cooperation in the world reflects different philosophies and strategies of countries. However, we share the common goal of fighting this pandemic and building back better. The solidarity and cooperation is the key towards this goal. I hope today's webinar was a step further to strengthen our cooperation with existing partners and development cooperation actors in Northeast Asia, future actors in Northeast Asia, such as CIDCA&KOICA. I thank all the panelists for sharing information and insights, and I thank all the participants for joining this webinar and sending us various questions and comments, although we didn't have time to respond to all the questions we received. Finally, my deep appreciation to our co-organizers, CIDRN, and the College of International Development and Global Agriculture. So we will post the presentations on the event page of our office website. Also, please let us know what you think about this webinar through evaluation survey, which we will send through email. On that note, and thank you again, and stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Look forward for the next. Thank you.